right, everybody, welcome to Concepts Live, Episode 2. It's our new show here with Modern Drummer Magazine, and it's the live version of the Concepts column that's been around for many, many years, and I've been blessed to be able to write it for the past 6 years. So we are here talking with an esteemed guest again, and we will get to him in just 1 second. But I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about what we're going to talk about today on Episode 2, since we're off and running with the series. We have either a past column or a current column topic to go over each episode. So this one's another past column, and that's from June of 2015. So if you guys want to look back either on your physical issues, or you can go to moderndrummer.com into the digital archives and look up June of 2015, and you're going to find a column entitled Focus on Elimination, the Key to Success. So we're going to discuss that column today. And as I mentioned before in the last episode, we had a great time with our last guest, Jeff Hamilton, a fine up-and-coming young drummer. And he gave us a lot of great information about some of the keys to success and how he felt success was stemmed through his career and how he felt about using it as a springboard and all the different things that we went over. It's amazing. So check out Episode 1, which we did last month, and that was on some of the keys to success. Our guest was Jeff Hamilton. So we are on Focused on Elimination, the Key to Success for this episode, and we always have, one of the things that I started when I started doing the column was having an inspirational quote from someone as we use as a basis to write from. And our quote for this episode is from a young man. He's actually only 31 years old. He's from Ghana, Africa, and his name is Israel Moore Ivor. And he's an inspirational speaker, an amazing young man. He's got an incredible book that I encourage everybody to check out. It's called Become a Better You. And we'll put up here, you can see a picture of Israel Moore, and you can check out that Become a Better You when you get a chance. But his quote for this particular column that I use is, "The secret for mastery is concentration. The success of concentration is in elimination." So it's kind of a mouthful, but it's very, very clear of what it means and how it helps us as a musician. First step is concentration. To become a master at something, we have to be able to concentrate while we're doing it, right? And the second part of that is the success of the concentration is the elimination. So we're going to talk about that with our guest. And I talked a lot about that in the column, about eliminating two things. The first thing in the column was we're going to eliminate anything that doesn't help you be able to execute what you're doing right now at a given point in time, right? So if you're playing with the band on stage, what do I need to execute what I'm doing, and what don't I need to execute that? And then the second step in that is what we kind of do to ourselves, right? We need to eliminate some of the things that we do to ourselves that stops us from executing at a high level. So there's two parts to that, and we'll get into that. So without further ado, let me bring our guest in, yet another incredibly esteemed artist and a great friend of mine for many years. Everyone knows him as one of the top drummers in the world, and of course a member of the band Journey, and that is my good friend, Mr. Steve Smith. So welcome, Steve.
Nice to be here.
Yes, great to see you in your drum workroom there.
That's right. I'm in the practice room.
Right. Yeah, that's a common thing for you, as I know.
Try to spend a couple hours every day here, having some fun and working on some ideas.
Yes, that's one of the things, we've known each other for a long time, and I can't remember exactly when we met, but it's got to be 25 years ago or something.
At least.
Yeah. And but one of the things that I always tell people, about you is that you're one of the best students that I've ever met of the instruments. I mean, you're a great student. I mean, just the time spent and the organization and the deliberate practice and all those different things that I've seen you do for all these years. It's great.
Well, I'm still quite fascinated by the instrument, of course, fascinated by music, but my personal way of expressing the music is on the drum set. So
Sure.
when I get exposed to some interesting ideas, new ideas, I'll ask a lot of questions and I'll dig in. And I'd say one of the lucky advantages people like you and I have is, especially when we can do drum camps and drum shows and things like that, we meet a lot of people and a lot of great drummers and the other teachers involved, or even the students. And they have something that is so interesting and fascinating, and I won't hesitate to go up and say, can you show me what it is?
I know. I love that about you, and that's something I've stole from you over the years too, is just kind of going, I don't care, I'm going to go talk to this guy. Right. Get it out of him, man. I mean, you met Karuna Murthy a few years before I did in Bavaria.
That's right.
Which pretty much set you onto the Southern Indian music, or any of the Indian music really, but set you into that by seeing him play.
Yeah. So Karuna Murthy that you mentioned, he's from South India. He plays a drum called taval.
Right.
It's not so common here in the U.S. We really haven't seen this drum, but it's a very loud outdoor Indian drum, which is quite unusual. Most of the Indian drums are quite quiet.
Yeah. But he's got the mallet in one side and the fingers on the other, right?
Yeah, on his right hand, you put these little, they look like thimbles.
Right.
They're caps, and so they make the right side real loud like a snare drum,
right.
And then the left side plays with a stick, and it's more like a bass drum sound. And so he was teaching a class at the camp called Rhythm, which is in Bavaria, Germany, and Mark Toberdorf.
We had a great time there.
2002, he had a class every night around 5 o'clock, and we were done teaching. The staff was finished, and so we would go to those lessons, and that's where I picked up the beginnings of conical and South Indian rhythmic philosophy.
Right. And I remember that because I think maybe the next time it happened, a couple years later, I was there, and I saw you and him playing, right? So you had been experiencing for a year and a half or 2 years or something, right? And I remember the first time, I think Johnny Rabb and I were sitting in the audience and we watched you guys play some of those Korbai things. And as you can attest, the first time you hear that, you're like, what just happened? Where's one? I don't even know what's happening. I know it's organized because these guys are playing it together, but I remember looking at Johnny going, what was that? What just happened? But it really spurs the interest in it. I mean, it's an amazing art form, and I've enjoyed working on it over the years. And
you jumped in with both feet and gotten deep into it too.
Yeah, and you know what? It's one of the other things that I think I was telling Joe Testa from Zildjian the other day. We were talking about it, and I said, a lot of us guys, we would find something like that, and I know you're like this, and I'm like this too. We find something like that, and then we don't try to jam it into the wrong place. We look cautiously for the right musical circumstance to apply that knowledge. And, because a lot of guys, I think, make the mistake of going, man, I put a lot of hours into this. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear it now. It doesn't matter where it's at. It could be at the Cohen Bar Mitzvah. It's like, you're going to get my new Korvais that I've been working on, but for me, I was like looking and looking and looking, and finally, I know you spent so much time with George Brooks, and then you guys ended up doing the Summit record, and with Kai, and who's the tabla player that's like Buddy Rich?
Is that Zakir Hussain?
Zakir Hussain. He's like the Buddy Rich of tabla.
That was a great group. Yeah, luckily, I ended up playing with a lot of Indian musicians or infusion combinations of Western musicians and Indian musicians. So it gave me an outlet to really start to develop those ideas.
Right, and that's the thing, is finding the right musical place to do that. I ended up working with Dr. L. Subramaniam and Kavita Krishnamurthy and those guys from India who gave me a chance to work on that. it's not fusion music. It's more Bollywood pop, a little bit more. Subramaniam's thing is a little bit more fusion. He's a fusion pioneer, but the same thing, just finding that outlet where you can use it in an effective and musical way. And, that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So with the column, and you had a chance to look through this. I don't know if you have.
I've read it, yes.
Thank you. And I don't know if, how many of you guys have spent time with this yet, but please check out June of 2015 on the Modern Drummer archives at moderndrummer.com. But one of the things about your playing that I love is it's the adventure of it. I think that's what we all loved about Tony Williams and drummers like that, where he was fearless. I mean, absolutely fearless but all with the intention behind it. It wasn't fearless like I'm out here, I don't know what's happening, I'm just going for stuff. It's like you're out there and you're fearless about trying something and working into something, but with an execution level that maintains intent and is always done in the most musical way possible. And I'd love to talk to you about the first step in this, about when you go to play something, let's say some of the Indian materials. It's not easy, that stuff. I mean, it's very difficult. So how do you center, like, I'm going to try to execute this thing right now? That stuff, if you're not familiar with that stuff, I recommend everybody check it out. But a lot of it sometimes is really based on really hardcore mathematics of what you're playing and trusting that your execution of that will get you out of it correctly. And how do you focus on eliminating the things out and going, I am going to work this with George Brooks and the guys and be able to play this? And how do you approach that stuff?
Well, I've spent a lot of time developing the ideas. So by the time I'm in a performance situation, I do have a level of confidence, a certain level of confidence.
Right.
And of course, anything can happen,
Right.
and it can go off the rails. But when I'm playing those compositions, a korbai, you mentioned the word korbai, essentially it means a rhythmic composition.
Right.
So when I'm playing one of those pre-calculated, like and they're memorized, memorized rhythmic compositions, I've played it enough times on my own to be confident that I'm going to come out right.
Right.
And like you mentioned, it's heavily based on math, and that's true. So I'm playing certain phrases, let's say, 7 time groups of 7, 3 of those, and then groups of 6, 3 of those, groups of 5, something like, some kind of predetermined.
And they're a lot commonly phrased in 3, just so everybody knows. Like
a lot of repetitions of phrases happen 3 times in general. And so I've played those enough to know that if I do it right, with the right spaces in between, it's going to come out on one. And that's, part of the beauty of that kind of music is the unison lines that happen between the front line and the rhythm section, because essentially that music is made up of melody and rhythm.
Right, right.
So they put a lot more emphasis on rhythm than in the Western world, where our emphasis essentially is on harmony.
Yeah, yeah. Everything is in D in India. It's like I've heard D for like 5 weeks straight. I'm like, because a lot of the temporas are D, or they might maybe E flat. Or
once, usually for the night, once you set what the root's going to be, it stays for the rest of the night. Right,
exactly.
But to get to, I think your bigger point is how do you stay calm under pressure?
Yeah. It could be from, you're in a stadium with Journey and there's 50,000 people, or Zakir Hussain is sitting beside you on tabla. To me, that's more nerve-wracking than the 50,000 people.
Without a doubt. But if we refer to your column, you were talking about being on American Idol sight reading, or being in the studio and there's a conductor and there's a screen and there's a producer and there's you're making a movie soundtrack, and those are pressure cooker, high stress situations.
Yeah.
And the question is, how do you get to a place of inner calm without the distractions, so you can take care of the task at hand and stay very focused?
Correct.
And I'm sure we all have different strategies for that.
Yeah.
And for me, it really doesn't depend, it all depends on just how I'm feeling about any situation. It could be, like you said, I could be playing in a small club, like Bach Dancing and Dynamite, for instance, was this little club. It's in Half Moon Bay, California, seats about 100 people. But if I'm playing with Zakir in Summit, I may be just as nervous as playing in front of 40,000 people at Citi Field.
Absolutely.
And so the key for me, there's a lot of things, but I have habits and rituals essentially that I use to get ready to perform.
Right. Okay.
And for me, I like to have at least 30 minutes or up to 45 minutes, pretty much just on my own. I can be in the dressing room with everyone else, but I'll just try to get centered and focused. Right. And I'll have my little pad.
Yeah, I've seen you.
And I'll just think about the music and get myself loose and tune in to my breathing.
Okay.
That's a real key. And a lot of that kind of training comes from yoga.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's a couple of different concepts come up. When I read your column, I thought of two essentially, similar concepts. One is being in the moment.
Correct. Yeah.
To really be in the moment. And there's techniques involved in that. And the first technique is breathing. Yeah. It's being involved, like breathing in and breathing out. And your entire focus is on breathing in and breathing out.
It sounds so simple, but there's been times where I'm playing and like my head is turning red and I'm starting to sweat, and then I realize like I've been holding my breath for like 40 seconds or a minute and a half. Literally, it's like I should breathe soon. And
I'm just now talking about preparation.
Right.
Getting ready, and so that'll be part of it. Is sometimes I'm just totally fine, I'm not needing to deal with some kind of fear factor, but if I am, then the breath and the ritual of my warm-up really helps me. And in the state, basically, that I'm trying to reach, and is called equanimity.
Okay.
There's a word for the state. And it's, you can look it up. It's a great word to look up. And it's a word that will serve lots of people. For instance, if you're a paramedic and you walk into a horrifying situation, you have to have some equanimity.
Right. You got
to make decisions. And, there's all kinds of folks that need to develop. It's the quality of being calm and even-tempered, especially under conditions adapted to excite great emotion. So it's a steadiness of mind under pressure.
Right.
And so there's and in yoga we work on that, and it has to do with the breathing and just really getting into that state of equanimity. So no matter what happens, you keep some kind of evenness of mind and perspective.
Right. That's great. And you know what? There's been a few gigs that I've been on that actually were like car wrecks. So I think that's something that I can work on. But you know what? That's part of it too. I think that's certainly learned, right, over a period of time.
That's okay. And my wife Diana and I, we read your column last night, and we were sipping a little Rioja on the deck, and we were having a discussion about it. And
Right.
she made some really great points. It's not something that you can just get into a situation like that and mentally switch this on,
Right.
like eliminate the distractions. It's something you train yourself to do.
Absolutely.
In a non-stressful situation.
Right. And what's interesting about that is I think that we are naturally trained via experience to get to that point, even if you don't know you're doing it, right? Because I think you arrive at that point, let's say I've done a lot of those sessions. So for me to go, yes, there's a conductor and a click and an orchestra and a thing, and yes, but I've done this 300 times. So I'm getting to that point. The work has been put in to get to that mindset, not maybe deliberately for that mindset, but because the earned experience is getting you there, right?
There's really no substitute for the experience.
Right. But we're ending up in the same place. So it's great to know where that, journey gets us.
In a way, these are newer concepts for me, and I say newer like in the last 10 years or something. Before that, I slowly got myself there just through experience.
Right, exactly.
Like the first Modern Drummer Festival that I played,
mm-hmm.
I was a wreck.
Right, of course.
And some of the first clinics, I remember the first clinic that I did and even the first clinic I did in Memphis, it's for strings and things. I remember being quite nervous, and there was like 25 people there.
Yeah, but you know what? Look, trust me, I get it, because that first clinic is the first time that you go, if no one talks, it's totally quiet. Like if I don't say anything, nothing's happening. Like I'm the only person doing this, and I have to carry this show. Like it's not like the drums where I got the guitar player to carry some and the singer to carry some, and it's like if you're not talking, it's quiet. And it's that realization. You know what happened to me at one of my first clinics? Probably the first clinic, I had all this stuff prepared, and no one was really asking questions, and I burnt through it in about 25 minutes. And I was like, I don't have anything else, man. Any questions? No. Cricket, and then there you go.
I remember for my first clinics, just talking into a microphone scared me to death.
Right.
I had never done that before.
Right.
So after a while, the experience of doing the clinics and doing performances in front of people that you may respect and you're worried about what they're thinking and all of that distraction, I had developed the ability to stay focused. So what you're talking about is, taking care of the task at hand. Right. And that is supporting the other musicians. So, so I made sure my focus is on playing musically and all the basic stuff that we think about when we're performing. Eye contact with the other guys in the band, playing in a supportive way, making sure the time feels good, and then, improvising or non-improvising, whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
And I find, to take it to another place, is that a lot of times you can get to a place where you surpass your own expectations once you really get into that zone.
Correct.
And so you really want to get into the zone of total focus on the music, not being distracted by the setting, whether that's 1,000 people or 10,000 or whatever it is, or it's just the musicians on stage, and then you transcend time and space.
Yeah.
In the playing. That's where we want to get, and that happens with that focus. You have to start with that focus.
And isn't that the the pinnacle of the whole thing for people that have experienced what it feels like when the whole band is grooving. And I mean, I've had other players come back and go, dude, I could play anything. Like,
Right.
anything, like stuff I didn't even know I could play. Just, you have the facility to do it. There's a freedom that exists at that position. And that's
what we're going for.
Yeah, that's it. And trying to get to that spot every time. And when I would go see Elvin, I saw Elvin play with his band several times, but I also opened for Elvin on a clinic tour, which talk about being scared to death, you know. Yeah. And he was just a sweetheart. He was like, "You're a master kid. Don't worry about it. You know, give me my beer." But you know, watching him, a guy like Elvin Jones, they seem to get to that point almost at the downbeat of the gig, you know, where other guys I would go and he's killing, it's ridiculous, you know, 5 tunes in it was killing, or one song, you know, whatever. But some of the, you know, a guy like Elvin, for me, it was just like, how does he get to that thing? Like, it just goes right there, like instantly. And that's the goal, isn't it? Just to get to the space.
But here's, you know, with a perspective, and I agree with you, and a lot of drummers from his generation, earlier generations, somewhat later generations, that was the goal of their music, is to get to that place where one could say you transcend space and time, and it's so magical to be in doing that and to be in the room, right, and to be lifted by that. It was the task at hand for that music.
Right.
That's very different than, let's say, industrial kind of playing.
Right. Right.
Meaning, like, you know, we're going to cut a track for this pop singer.
Yeah.
You know, that has its own art form, but you're not really trying to, like.
Right. Where the creativity is holding regard above everything, and it's just.
Yeah. You're having.
I call it utilitarian playing, like.
Yeah, it's like industrial kind of workman playing.
We're selling cornflakes, people. That's what we're doing. Don't get too excited. Put the octobans away. We're selling cornflakes, you know.
But even, you know, with that kind of playing, you want to be on from the first minute.
Absolutely.
So what my wife Diane had to say last night, and I really, you know, thought she hit some. You treat all gigs the same.
Yes.
So you treat a big gig like it's a little gig, but you treat your little gigs like it's a big gig. Right. So there's your training. There's how you can train for it in a low stress situation. You know, you're playing a wedding, but you take it seriously.
Yeah.
But not so seriously that you're freaking out about everything that you play. You know, so you just train yourself to get focused on the task in hand and play the music. So, like when you're in, you know, if you are in a situation where you're playing, like for me, like Journey a couple of years ago, when we were out touring with Def Leppard and we're playing at Citi Field or something, and it's 40,000 people, and people say to me, "Aren't you excited?" And the answer is no.
Yes, right.
No, really.
I know.
It's no, because I don't want to get caught up in
right.
some kind of excitement, because I want to stay focused on playing the music. So no matter if I'm playing in a club or playing in a big stadium, my answer is no.
Right.
I'm not excited.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be doing it.
Right.
But I'm not. I don't want to. And you mentioned something in the column is and I really like that. Is that you said, let the situation surrounding you play out on its own.
Correct.
So that's for other people to be excited and
right.
other people to have fun and come
right.
and party. And it's like, you know,
yeah.
So when people come to the jazz club and they think, oh, let's have a drink, you know, with you before the gig. Well, I'm not there.
Right. I'm not here
for the drink before the gig.
You're here for the party. I'm not here for the But you know what? It's really interesting. My wife's uncle is Mike Holmgren, the NFL coach. He's the, you know, won several Super Bowls. He was the coach of the Packers and then Seahawks for years. And I've spent time with Uncle Mike talking to him about the NFL guys. And there was a couple things and I used it a little bit as a reference in the column when I was talking about it was it was around when the Super Bowl was happening, and I was watching all these interviews. But one of the things that Mike told me was that what's very unique about the NFL, it's similar to music. I took it that way, where they literally get up at 6 a.m. and they work till 6 and 7 and 8 at night for 6 days straight, so that they can perform for this 3-hour window on Sunday at the highest level possible, with all the preparation, with all the focus, with all those things. And when you would see the spectacle of an NFL game, especially a Super Bowl, which is like, it's gone out of control, right? How, here's Tom Brady, throwing for historical touchdowns and historical yards, and in the middle of this majesty and the chaos of this whole thing. And in my brain, the only thing I'm thinking is exactly what you just said. Like, his focus on the execution of what he's there to do is paramount. And this circus that's happened around him can just go on its own accord. Like,
that's right.
It's all to be there. Like, I've come to several of the shows. One of the ones that I brought the girls to was in San Diego, and it was with Def Leppard. In one, I forget the name of that stadium, but I remember
was it the Petco Stadium?
Petco Stadium, that's right. Everybody gets a free dog leash when you leave. I remember laughing with you backstage because one of the decisions that you had made, and as I see your journey kit back there, which is the one you used on that tour, you were very controlled about stick height, about getting the right sound out of the drums. Of course, as many of you hopefully know, there's a point at which the delivery of impact into the instrument starts to make the sound worse. So, if you're hitting the drum too hard, it actually sounds better when you hit it at a medium to medium low level and all those kind of things. But to watch you at Petco Stadium with the circus that is a Journey Def Leppard show, and you're, back there with 8-10-inch stick heights, consistent around the drums, drum sound impeccable, all that kind of stuff. It's a really great example of exactly what you're talking about. Because the first thing, I remember the first arena tour that I did, I went out there and I was up here, with every stroke, and my hands are cramping 2 tunes in, and I'm like, I'm sweating, going, I got 2 more hours to go. Why am I doing this to myself? But I thought that was an amazing display of that. And just.
Well, thank you. Yeah, as far as preparing for those shows, I did just what I'm talking about. I'd spend about 45 minutes warming up, just staying focused, and my warm up for those shows was trying to figure out what I wanted to do that night in the drum solo, because as far as the songs go, they were very scripted, and
they play themselves at this point, right?
Yeah, I knew what I was going to play for the most part in all the tunes, so it's just getting the chops warmed up. And in fact, part of going back and playing with Journey again in 2016, part of what interested me about doing it was just to see what it would be like to play that music 30-something years after I played it when I was in my 20s.
Sure.
And if I could do it with my current new technique and not have to feel like I really need to beat myself up and play hard. And
there's a lot of other things too. Like, now you play down onto the instrument, right? Versus back then you played up into the instrument. It was much. This ride was up here, and we all did that. I see pictures of myself in my ride. I'm like, what was I doing? My ride's up in the air, and
I had the concept that I had to play hard and I had to play loud and all of that. And I've since learned, no, I want to play so I have a big sound, but I want the drums to sing and sound as good as they can sound. And just like you said, there's an optimum velocity to play every drum at.
Yeah.
And I want to get the right snare sound and the right bass drum sound. And I know if I hit my 8-inch tom, it's going to take a certain amount of velocity that is going to be different than my 16 or 18.
Right.
And if I play that 8-inch splash, that's going to be different than my 18-inch crash. So I have the touch to make those choices. And in fact, most of the time I didn't even work up a sweat on those.
I love it.
And it was fairly, easy to play those grooves just being focused on sound.
Right.
And groove, and not like the extra effort of trying to play loud, because drums are loud and they're going to be loud already. They're loud enough.
Right, but you know what's really interesting about that, and I've talked in interviews about this before, because guys would mention that to me, like, man, you're not really playing that loud. Like, the older you're getting, the quieter you're playing. You know, and I would say, well, one, we've invented microphones. That's the first thing. You can turn them up, right? So the second thing for me was, and I think this is a great point about what you're talking about, as a drummer, our instrument's loud in general, right? Tony Williams, you know, used to make statements about, look, drums are loud, it is what it is, you know. But we are used to sort of filling up the chamber of where we are with sound. Like your drum room there, that's full of sound when you play, you know. Even the club, like you could easily fill up, you know, the club in Half Moon Bay or Catalina Bar and Grill or something if you really lay into the drums. I can fill that area, that chamber with sound. When you get on a big stage, you can't fill Petco Stadium with sound. There's no point in me attempting to control the ensemble, control the situation by, you know, overpowering the band or whatever I think I'm going to do by laying into this instrument so hard. Look, I got to just play the way I play and allow the guy out front just to make it louder. And I think that's part of it too, is maturing to that point where I'm not going to control this thing. Like I got to do and rely on, you know, the gear at this point or so.
That's right. Yeah, you're talking about playing the room.
Yeah.
And I've always, you know, that's something I grew up understanding, and you play the sensible overall dynamic range for the room and for the stage and the size of the room. But when you get into like these arenas and stadiums, there's no too loud about it.
Right.
So you have to just play within the integrity so your inner balance is right and the overall balance is sensible for the situation. But
you know what, the really great bands that even, you know, that would play, I saw the Eagles and those guys, and it was almost like, and Journey was like this too, but it was almost like they were mixing themselves in the club. Like we do on stage, right? So if you're playing at a small club, the best bands mix themselves. And most front of house guys say, look, a great band, all I do is make them louder. I don't mix them. You know, if you see a guy back there with faders doing this, like he's cooking spaghetti, like something's wrong, you know. either the band is not mixing itself, or he's trying too much to create the mix. The ensemble just creates the mix, the guy just brings it up so more people can hear it. And I think that's an internal focus of guys like yourself, of, you know, generations of playing different size clubs and mixing yourselves into the ensemble. And even on a big stage, there's a little bit of that, like you said, I mean, let's keep it together.
Yeah, it comes from, especially as drummers, playing with acoustic musicians.
Yes.
And in coming up, I played mainly with acoustic musicians, which is very different than playing with all electric musicians.
Absolutely.
And so if I'm playing with an upright bass and an acoustic piano and a saxophone player, the demand is to play in a sensible way.
Right.
So you're complementary. And so you're saying, like we're mixing ourselves on stage. If I'm on stage at Catalina's or Birdland or one of these clubs, I have to play so it makes sense. Now, one of the things with Journey on stage is Journey has a quiet stage, which means essentially everything is direct except for the drums and the vocals. So, you know, we're the two acoustic musicians are the singer and the drummer.
Right.
And everyone else is electric, but there's no sound on stage.
Right.
Except for the drums. So we hear ourselves through the in-ears. So that's really different than if we played a show with another band that has amplifiers on stage.
Yeah.
It's loud, and you know, we did a tour with Asia with Carl Palmer, and they were loud. like really loud, and but that worked for Carl. Like he had the guitar player had a stack of Marshalls to his right, and the bass player was here.
Right, that's old school, man.
He didn't have any in-ears. He was like so old school, but it forced him to play louder, way louder, let's say, than I play. But that really worked for him. He enjoyed that. Because
it feels fun. It's fun to play that because you feel the bass and Now we all have the Porter and Davies thrones and stuff that sort of mimic, right? Because it's putting those sound waves into your body as if they're 18-inch subwoofers or whatever. And it's funny. I opened up for Kiss at the Rose Bowl many years ago, and they had this ridiculous wall of Marshall stacks, but behind all of it was a Fender Twin with a 57 on it. It was all in ears too, but it all looked like that. But I'll never forget that, where I was like, oh my gosh, it's a Fender Twin with a 57, and they got all these fake Marshall stacks up there. But well, that is incredible information. Let's talk about the second point, which I think is really crucial as well, where we sort of create our own distractions, and it can be a distraction for ourselves, and it can be a distraction for the people not only in the band but the audience. But trying to always make sure that we are playing the correct thing at the correct time, and not trying to force things in that we've been working on. And hey, I put a lot of time into this lick, so you're going to hear it. Music be damned. I remember one time in high school, my high school band director used to call it Miller's Lick of the Week. Like, we're going to hear this all week long because Miller's been working on it. But can you talk a little bit about it's a deeper approach to music, the different situations, and how you feel freedom in those situations, like you're talking about with Journey, for instance. I mean, at this point, with some of those tunes, the fills are as much a part of the composition as the lyric is. I mean, if you don't play those fills in faithfully, it's almost like what just happened. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's some things that's what I got to play. There's other things that, have a lot of improvisation involved. And then where that line is between those things that you're working on that are ready to present, like you said, that you're working on here in the room, and then holding and waiting to present them in the right way, listening, just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's essentially your musicianship.
Yeah.
You're talking about your musicianship, your ability to make good decisions in the moment.
Right.
And that is, in a lot of ways, that is a definition about musicianship, and especially, in a situation, well, any kind of situation, whether it's the music is very composed, like you're saying, playing the fills and faithfully that I played on the record,
right.
Or if it's, if it's freer and there's improvisation, it's making those good decisions. So, that's just a key element to how I want to present myself and inhabit that idea of being a good musician.
Yeah, and do you think, I see that as when people go, how do you play more musically, or how do you develop musicality? How would you define a path to that? I think that maybe one of the parts is decision making, right? Because you could have the most facility in the world. If you make horrible decisions, it's just not going to be effective.
That's right. You have to be really clear about, what that music is saying, whatever the music is that you're playing, and what will be appropriate for the other musicians that you're playing with.
That's a great point
for them.
Right.
And so I had it, and it may take time to figure out what everyone in the band needs. And like, for instance, couple of examples. If I, and with Journey, we did have places where we'd improvise, certain guitar solos you could stretch out. But I noticed I had to be very clear on fills, even if they were complementary of the solo, of what would be appropriate and not lose one of the guys in the band.
Yeah.
So that's one aspect of it.
Right.
On the other hand, I did a tour a number of years ago with Dave Liebman, and we played a bunch of jazz festivals in Canada. And I have played jazz a lot with Mike Stern. Now, and there's a fine line with the people that you play with. Like with Mike Stern, he really wanted to hear me outline the form. He's self-contained, very self-contained, so he doesn't need it to be like super black and white.
Right.
But it can be abstract to a point.
Right.
But then there's a point where he still wants to hear one at the beginning of the form.
Right.
Okay, but on tour with Dave Liebman, who had, played with...
I know, I played with Dave, yeah.
Yeah, and
because I think part of that, what you're discussing is there's a development of internal timekeeping in those musicians that, Liebman's internal timekeeping is highly developed. So
what I call self-contained.
Right, self-contained.
So he came to me after one of the gigs and he said, "Don't play so obvious."
Right.
Here's like a wide spectrum. I'm in some situations where I have to play very obviously.
Right.
Like painting a big picture in black and white.
Right.
And then
here is the downbeat. You can play here.
And then in other situations, it's somewhere in between.
Right.
And then in a situation with Dave, he was like, "Don't give me the one." He goes, "I know where one is."
Right.
And then he said something that I really loved. He goes, "Listen, if I get lost, I'll keep playing until I figure out where I am."
Right, exactly.
So then I adapted myself
to
that situation because I realized, okay, and I found a similar kind of freedom playing with Hiromi and Anthony Jackson. They're both so self-contained. Even though we're playing in odd time signatures, I didn't need to outline things very clearly. I played them so I didn't get lost.
Right.
I made sure I knew where I was, and as long as I knew where I was, they knew where they were.
Well, there's two things I want to say. First off, it reminds me a lot, and it's a great point. Like I saw for a while there, it became very fashionable to play like the clave with their left foot. Drummers were playing the clave with their left foot. They were doing all this stuff. And I was coming out of college and everything, and I was like, "Oh, that's great. I want to learn how to play clave with their left." But I'm playing with all these like serious Afro-Cuban musicians from Cuba in Miami, right? So here I come, the kid from Ohio, like, dig this, man. Like, I'm playing, and they're all looking at me like, "Stop playing the clave." You know where the clave's at. How would you like me to bang the quarter note cowbell in your ear for the whole gig? That's the way it feels like to me, like we don't need the clave. It's the same sort of thing, where you got to analyze who are you working with here and what can they handle, do they have to hear that fill or they won't even come in, that kind of situation, or do they just need a fill? That
may take some time to figure out what people want to hear, and even in the group Steps Ahead, we had some. I've been in various incarnations of Steps Ahead, and when I played behind the saxophone player Bendick, when Michael Brecker left the band, we had Bendick in the group. Now he wanted a very ethereal kind of playing behind him, and he was real clear about it, versus when Mike Maneri was soloing. He was more just play and give me some real clear straight time, but it can be more dense. So it was a difference between like the sort of a density versus ethereal, so even in a group, you can have different people that that want different things behind them.
Yeah, you would play with a singer or someone like that, and have a different approach during the sax solo or the guitar solo than when the singer was. It's what I think.
There's your decision making, your musicianship. You're making choices, but. You have to listen. You have to talk about this stuff sometimes. Maybe you can intuit it, But if you do spend some time with people, you have a discussion, and you know, and it's an ongoing developmental creative process.
And you know what? That brings me to my second point, which was I think that one of the reasons that a lot of generations younger than ours have been challenged with this situation of playing things that are sort of musically distracting, I would call it, is, you know, we grew up, I mean, how many gigs? It's just thousands and thousands of gigs. I mean, from the horrible ones to the great ones, to the club, to the arena, to the session thing, just playing all this music with all these different people. And now I've been witnessing a generation, maybe even two, who have focused so much on play-alongs, you know, tracks, playing by themselves with tracks with clicks, and you know, you know, creating situations. I've seen a lot of drummers as leaders, quote unquote, create situations where it was almost to the point where it was like, this is what I want to play. You know, like we were talking about earlier, this is what I want to play. Let's put something together that makes this musical, quote unquote, but I'm going to play this on the drums, and we're going to create music to that, versus this music it's alive, it's breathing, it's doing this, and it's asking me to play this for it. You know, it's a whole different head switch. And, you know, one of the things about your playing that I've always loved is that you have command over so many disciplines. And I mean, I think we were talking in a text a couple of days ago, and I went, will you please go fishing? Please stop practicing and go fishing, because, you know, you have so many disciplines. And Hamilton and I were talking about this. It's like, man, you got command over the brush thing, and you got command over the double bass thing, and you got, you know, this soul, then it's swing, then it's rock, then it's thing, you know, and good Lord above. I mean, I love it, and it's been enjoyable to be your friend and listen to it for all these years and watch you advance too. But you know, one of the things I think is so important about what you do, what we try to do, is witnessing you either create a scenario like the Groove Blue Trio. There's a scenario where you don't create it like, let me make music to go with what I've been working on. I've been working on, like, say this, you've been working on your brush thing, you've been working on your swing thing. Let's get a musical scenario in place that will allow those things to flourish, given the right moment in the music to do so, right? Versus, you know, I'll make a track or something so I can do this, you know. And that's one of the things that I always loved about you, and watching all those different incarnations of Vital Information, right? The New York City edition, and then the regular fusion band, and so on and so forth. To me, it was always me witnessing you going, I really feel led down this discipline, in Indian music, brushes, whatever it was, and building a beautiful musical scenario to allow it to flourish. Is that been like a focus, or has it just happened organically?
Okay, I guess how I see my career, in a lot of ways, it's multifaceted, and I spend time between being a sideman and being a band leader. Okay, right. And then as a sideman, I'm selective who I want to tour with, or, you know, play with. Sure. And how that I want to experience the music that they have to offer. Right. And then I get to be in a situation where, if I'm the band leader, then I can set up a scenario where, like you're saying, I want to incorporate the Indian rhythms into the music of Vital Information. Right. You know, so I work to try to set up a scenario that I can be creative in a situation, or like I did with George Brooks and Prasanna, we did this Ragabop trio. Right. And it was something that just came about fairly organically, and then we went with it and developed it. And so, yeah, and I've been fortunate to put together groups, or with Tony Monaco and Vinnie Valentino, the Groove Blue Organ Trio. That's something that developed rather naturally, but we made it happen. You know, we got on the phone to each other, we wrote emails, let's make a record, let's go out and play some gigs. Right. So it's a chance to develop some of the ideas that are interesting to me and, you know, to the other guys. And So what I look for are guys that I enjoy hanging out with and enjoy playing with, and let's make some music together.
And they have that same level of experiment. I mean, look, you got Vinny, studying conical and working on conical. Vinny Valentino is a great guitar player. Vinny and I played tons of gigs together, and before you met him, actually, and we had a trio with Victor Bailey and I and him. But, when I first saw Vinny do conical stuff, I'm like, are you kidding me? I can't believe it.
That was cool. That was his own thing. He decided he wanted to double. I told him these, they sound good. Conical sounds really great if it's doubled. And he just started practicing, and I, started guiding him. So yeah, that was pretty cool that he developed that ability so we could do that on the gig.
Yeah, and it's finding those. Art Blakey to me was like he was a magician of finding these amazing musicians. Wow. And I think as your musicianship develops, you get this innate ability to find guys that play well with you, that you like, that have the same level of experimentation or the same level of desire to advance themselves. And look at all the great players that you've crooned. I mean, I'm good friends with Tim Landers, was in Vital Information for years. Yeah. And I mean, Baron Brown has been a staple for you through a lot of the bands, right? Not just the main Vital Information.
20 years, yeah.
Yeah, and Mark Sokin, I mean, he's an amazing player, and I mean, you certainly didn't develop their careers; those guys have been around. But I mean, just organizing that ensemble and seeing what comes out of it is a skill set in itself.
Yeah, well, I realize, and you and I have talked about this. I do a lot of different things, but it's not really possible to do everything and have a career in everything. So, like what I stopped doing session work. Yeah. I made a choice, and it was around, it was somewhere around the early 2000, late 90s, early 2000. If I wanted to develop as a band leader, I needed to be on tour. I needed to be on the road, and I got an agent and made myself available to tour. And so, I had made the choice to and not that I was doing a ton of session work, but I was doing a fair amount in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, I remember.
And so but I made that choice to focus on being a band leader and being a side man for the right people.
Right.
And going on tour. Because let's bring it back to what you brought up about people, playing to the tracks and things like that. It's crucial for me to play with live musicians.
Yeah.
That's just the most rewarding experience that I can have.
Yeah.
Musically. And I like to make records and make my own records and jazz records, but let's say the industrial side of making Italian pop records with Corrado Rustici, I enjoy doing it. He's a producer that called me for a lot of sessions in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. But once, I got to a certain point, I realized this isn't exactly how I want to play the drums.
Yes.
I want to play with other musicians and have that experience. These days, it's harder and harder for young musicians to have the experience. Yeah. To play with other musicians. So
yeah, I mean, even doing sessions back then too, we a lot of times the whole band was playing, or
the whole band.
Now it's like, I mean, really.
And the take would be, what was the take where everyone played the best?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
As a unit.
Yeah.
And even if I had a mistake or two.
Yeah.
We'd leave it for the benefit of the whole experience, which, of course, that's different now because, even when I occasionally do a session, I'm usually the last one to go on.
Right.
There's pretty much everything's done, and they put drums on to sort of give it a little more life.
Right.
But the idea for these days, it's going to be crucial for young musicians, young drummers to play with other musicians and to develop that skill, because it is a skill to develop to play with tracks. That's no question. That is a particular kind of skill. But to have that give and take and play with other musicians, to me, that, that's how you develop your musicianship in that situation. And that is the goal. That's the main reason I want to play music is to play with other people and have that experience.
Yeah, Ed Thickman, when I was studying with Ed, we talked about that, and he said something to me that kicked my rear end. He goes, yeah, when I see that, it looks like two people reading books to each other rather than them having a conversation with one another. Because it's all predestined, right? It's like, this is the track, this is what I play to that track, and I'm going to play that for you, and you're going to play yours for me, and we're going to, it's almost like reading books to each other rather than going, we're going to sit down and converse and,
we're going to get a pulse. We're going to establish the pulse, and then we're going to have a communication in that pulse. And, of course, there's a lot of things that happen with live music, and you want your time to be good. Yeah. But it's not all.
I talked about that in the column too. That was as our last little point. One of the things that we talk about there is how important it is to work on the facilities that you're developing in relation to that pulse, and having that bed of time, and that everything is relative to that bed of time, and not working on things just out in the space-time continuum, that here's this movement or whatever, and it doesn't relate to that. And I think that's an important thing to discuss quickly. But
well, you brought up the kind of the drum off kind of scenario, right, where there's a drum competition. So I felt like that's like, in a way, it's a completely different subject.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, because the task at hand there is some kind of, it's a drum competition, and there's parameters around what the judges are looking for. At least as a contestant, you're told that.
Right.
Now, in general, I'm not against these kind of musical competitions, because they're ways that people use to stay inspired and work to get better.
Yeah.
Because for instance, I have a friend that his son, Ram, you might know Ram, who has a son, Miles, who's a very good classical pianist. Yeah. And he is involved with competitions. And, of course, he would like to win the competitions all the time. But what I see happen is the competition inspires him to practice and put in the time and develop his repertoire. And then he goes out and he plays, and he becomes better as a result. Win or lose, it doesn't matter.
Right.
He wins in the fact that he's now a better musician.
Right. Good.
Because he's put in the time. And a drum competition could be the same thing, but the parameters aren't as clear, because you're not learning a Chopin or Beethoven piece. Or, it's kind of free form. What is it that you're trying to do here? Right. And for me, when I judge those and see those, they are kind of rough, because there's a showbiz aspect to them. You want to hear that the guy's got groove and got ideas, but like you say in the column, it would be nice to hear everything played in time.
Yeah.
And when I play my solos, pretty much in almost any situation, my solos are in time.
Of course.
They're part of a tune, there's part of a tune. Or even if it's a standalone solo, it's in a form. I'm playing a blues or an AABA form, and I'm keeping everything in time. And that's really fun for me. I enjoy that.
And the audience.
And the audience can relate to it more. So, but I think there's a certain amount of leeway I have to give the contestants to those drum competitions, because they're young, they're excited, they haven't developed that kind of experience that we're talking about. They maybe haven't developed their ability to be calm and have equanimity under pressure.
Right.
And they're just kind of like,
Yeah, right. Well, I said in the
I
column.
would like to see like just more clarity from
Right.
whatever the situation is. Like here, we want you to play for 4 minutes in time, play, some drum compositions, something like what Max Roach may have done.
Correct. Right.
And with a drum set composition or your own idea, of course, but just
or
a little
more. Play like a standard, like, I've seen, I learned how to play Seven Steps to Heaven on the toms, and, and then, you've seen Hamilton, he does Caravan. It's unbelievable. Anything like that or something, just pick a standard or do it in a form, Yeah, I agree. Well, that's a good point. Well, look, we're running short on time. There's a couple things.
Okay.
The last couple records you have,
yes.
We got the last Vital Information. That's an NYC edition, Heart of the City, and that's Baron and Mark Sokin and Vinny, right? And Andy Fusco and George Brooks. Oh, there it is. Yes, it is. There, I have that record. It's a great record. And we were talking about George Brooks earlier. He's on that album too.
Yeah, George is on one of the tunes that he and I wrote together using some of the Indian rhythms, and he.
Okay, right. Yes, that's right. And George, like we mentioned earlier, with Kai Eckhart and Zakir, you guys had that trio or quartet back in the day. And the other one is the Groove Blue Trio, which is with Tony Monaco and Vinnie Valentino. And Tony's an amazing B3 player. I mean, he's just a hoot. And Tony and Ernie Watts and I just did a record.
I look forward to hearing that.
Yeah, we had a great time. And of course with Vinnie Valentino, very talented singer and guitar player. And I love that album. I saw you guys, I think we did a gig together
in Canada.
In Canada for the drum festival there, and you had the band there, right?
Ralph Angelilo's festival.
That's right. And you had the band there for that. So I love that trio. You sound brilliant with that, as most everything else. But one of the things that I loved about that was how much brush work was involved in that, and mentioning that, I wanted to bring up quickly about the amazing project that you and Nussbaum did years back with Hudson.
Right, the art of playing with brushes.
Right, I love that, and one of the things that's amazing about that, you have that there? You have a copy of that there?
No, I had it, but I brought it in the house.
Okay, Diane's working.
I had it out here, then I brought it in to watch it. I hadn't watched it for a while.
Oh, and it's like about 37 hours long or something, right? It's like
about 7 hours long.
It's so much information, and but one of the things I love about that, the play-alongs are amazing, and I use those to practice with a lot.
Well, the whole concept, Adam came up with the concept, and it was based on the play-along.
Right.
He had the idea, let's go in the studio with a bass player and a guitar player, record tracks at various tempos and various feels, like Latin feels and jazz, grooves, and have a bunch of different drummers play to the exact same track so we can compare.
Right. There's our drum competition. See?
Yeah.
that's what we
everyone play the same song with the same live band.
Right.
Not tracked.
Not tracked. There you go. Now we got it. Now we're getting something here. Right. And then the last book is Pathways of Motion, right?
Yeah, that's the newest. It's a book, but really I'd say the main ingredient is the DVD or the download. It's like a 2-hour explanation of how I've been working on match grip. Right. And then the book supports that DVD and my demonstrations it's basically the way I've taught myself now how to develop match grip. So that is an option in my playing.
Right. Yeah, and it's been great to see that. A lot of French style thumbs up and stuff I've seen you use. And you have no shortage of products out there, which is great, because I stand by the fact, and that it's our responsibility. Someone like yourself that has gained so much information and had so many experiences that you hold a responsibility to pass that information on. And I think it's so important. And if Ed and all those guys that we're talking about that we've come up on and got information, if they didn't do it, you wouldn't be sitting there, or I wouldn't be sitting here, any of us. So we so appreciate that you do that, and that's part of your, your drive to give that information back. And I just encourage everybody to look into as many of Steve's products as possible. They're all done at a very, very high level. I recommend them all.
Thanks. Thank you, Russ.
Of course. Well, look, I can't thank you enough for doing this. It's been amazing. The information has been great to get inside of your head with some of that stuff. And we're going to look up, what's our term again?
Equanimity.
Equanimity. Okay, we're going to look that up. I got to figure out how to spell it first, and then we're going to look it up. And
I'll spell it for you.
Okay.
Equanimity.
Okay.
Equanimity.
All right, we're gonna search that, and maybe we'll do a whole column on that one. Maybe we'll do that.
There you go. A new column.
A new column. All right. Thank you, Steve. Tell Diane I said hi, and we will talk soon. We can't thank you enough for being a part of this, and early in the episodes, but episode 2 to have a person like yourself involved is just an absolute joy and honor. So thank you.
All the best, and I'm glad that you've taken over this column.
Well, thank you.
That Roy Burns established, and you're following in his footsteps in more ways than one, because you have the products and all that yourself.
Well, thanks.
Roy got into that in his career as well, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That you're,
yeah, he was my first drum clinic. He was.
That's cool.
Yeah, and he was great. He called me right after I started doing the column, and was. He was really cool about it and very supportive.
That's
great, man.
So, all right. Thank you, Steve.
All right.
Thank you. And for everyone else, episode 2 has come to a close of Modern Drummer Concepts Live. And we are here monthly for another episode of either regarding a past column or a current column. And we will see you guys on the next episode. Make sure to check out the June 2015 column, which is what we discussed today, at moderndrummer.com under the digital archives. Or, of course, if you're a nerd like me and still have all the physical copies, you can do it there as well. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Concept Live episode 2 is closing out. We'll see you guys next month. Thanks so much.